Hey everybody, CVH here, and today I'll be doing a video on my first impressions of the monthly reward card for April, which was revealed the day before I'm recording this video, actually. I have seen a few other people talking about this card in videos, on streams, on forums, on Reddit, etc., so I'm a bit late to the party, but I figured if you guys haven't seen it yet, that I should do a video here on this channel and sort of give you my first impressions. I like doing these whenever we get revealed cards, hopefully you like them too. As always, let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on the card and on the content. But if you haven't seen the card for April yet, here it is, Chaurus Breeding Pit. A 10 magicka action for agility with a fairly simple and straightforward effect. Summon a Chaurus Reaper in each lane. Pretty straightforward card, and we have seen cards with similar effects for a long time in Legends. We have Two Moons Contemplation, which summons Priest of the Moons in each lane. Slaughterfish Spawning summons a Slaughterfish in each lane. Hist Grove, probably one of the another, along with the pre-nerf Slaughterfish Spawning, that is one of the most competitive, summons an 8/8 Swamp Leviathan in each lane. A few of these exist, so it's definitely a card that has potential. We have to sort of look a little bit deeper if we think it's going to see play. We have to figure out what kind of deck this would go in. A few of the cards I just got done mentioning go in vastly different styles of decks. Slaughterfish Spawning, for example, is primarily aggressive. Histgrove, for example, primarily goes in Ramp Scout and other ramp control decks, so we have to find the place this goes in. Obviously, it is a 10 magicka card, which means it's pretty much just off of the menu for aggro decks, and probably not really worth it for mid-range decks, not so much because of its cost, but because the bodies it's putting on board aren't really aggressively statted. Just 5/4s, and the effect isn't particularly useful, I don't think, for a deck that's really trying to put threats on the board and threaten the opponent's life total. So my initial reaction would be that this is primarily going to be a control card or a ramp card. So decks like Control Monk or Ram Scout, I could see wanting to play it more so than the others. Whether or not it's worth it, we need to delve a little bit deeper. We have some pretty powerful cards that cost 10 to compete with. Manticora, for example, really hogs the spot in most control decks. Not so much in Ramp Scout because it doesn't have a willpower in the deck, but we also have Nest of Vipers, which is another 10 cost agility action, and it also doesn't see a whole lot of play because it's just simply not a strong enough effect on average to warrant the fact that you're playing another 10 cost card in your deck. But we have seen a little bit more of the 10 cost Nest of Vipers thanks to Chanter of Akatosh in the Fall of the Dark Brotherhood expansion, which enables you to play the Nest of Vipers, get the value out of the Nest of Vipers, and search your deck for the aforementioned Manticora. So I could definitely see Chaurus Breeding Pit being used in place maybe of Nest of Vipers in some of these decks. I definitely think it's at least worth testing the one of Chaurus Breeding Pit if you are playing a Control Monk deck, and if that deck contains Chanter of Akatosh. That seems like a pretty high utility play to me. That said, on average, I don't think this card is amazing if we compare it to actual board clears like Ice Storm and Odoving, things that control decks typically do have access to. Even Dawn's Wrath and Immolating Blast, although this does affect both lanes and those cards don't always do so. Even compared to those, mostly the Ice Storm and the Odoving though, -1/-1 to every creature on your opponent's board. While that is potentially a lot of creatures, it's not going to be killing a whole lot when turns 10 roll around. Obviously, you could get this card reduced with a Thieves Guild or something like that, but generally speaking, this card isn't going to outright kill a whole lot. It might set up a couple favorable trades in either lane, and one thing I do like is that, Chaurus Reaper is going to soften up your opponent's board. So if you're facing a lot of incoming pressure, this will at least reduce the number of damage you take the following turn by hopefully a fairly significant amount, just one for each creature your opponent has, and maybe it'll kill something if your aggro deck opponent is playing certain things and trying to stabilize, although by that point you're probably going to be having them hold up in like one lane instead of two. So this card, in order to get max value out of it, you kind of require the perfect situation, and overall I don't think the effect is too strong, so I'm not sure if this is going to see a whole lot of constructed play. I'm not quite sure it's worth including as yet another expensive option in decks that typically run a bunch of expensive cards, and like I mentioned, the decks that curved out earlier probably don't want to play this 10 cost defensive action. But to be fair, this card does put a pretty substantial amount of stats on the board. They're not aggressively statted cards, the Chaurus Reapers, but it does add up to 10/8 of stats split among two bodies, so a single Piercing Javelin or a single Manticora is not going to be able to deal with that. Definitely could be pretty swingy in the later stages of a control matchup. For example, dealing with some of your opponent's board, like I mentioned, softening it up, while putting two bodies out there and then forcing your opponent to be the reactive player. Even if your opponent doesn't even have anything on the board, simply summoning two 5/4s in the later stages stages of the game could be enough pressure to start letting you attack, letting you destroy your opponent's runes and start pushing for lethal. Although I don't think that's the primary use of the card whatsoever, putting the stats on board, we can't really underestimate that, and for that reason, I'm actually thinking that this card would be a pretty natural fit in arena decks. Obviously, turn 10 doesn't roll around in every single arena game. Decks tend to be pretty aggressive in that format, but on the rare chance you do pick a 10 cost, you want something versatile, and cards like Manticora can be fine in arena because they're great removal, great guards for any sort of deck that's going to go late. And I think this card, if your deck appears that it can sort of stall the game, play a bit more defensively, and go later into the game, I think this is one of those versatile cards. It might actually kill more in arena than in constructed, because there's a higher density of just weak creatures in general in arena, so you're going to be softening up your opponent's board significantly if you're sort of just both stockpiling creatures, and putting the 5/4s on board in that format is pretty huge compared to in constructed. There's a lot of answers to 5/4s in constructed, but in arena, putting both of those on board at the same time, if you've rolled around to turn 10, that could be a potential power play. I'm not saying it's going to be insane in arena, because it is an epic and is therefore competing for picks with all the other epics, and there are some damn good epics in arena, but I do think this is definitely worth considering in a bunch of drafts, more so than I think I would consider playing it in constructed, but I could be surprised. It could be a one of in certain control decks. Looking forward to see how people innovate with it. So that's it for me. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments what you think about this monthly reward card. Let me know if you think I've underrated it, overrated it, or if I just blatantly missed something. Looking forward to hearing all of those. Feel free to drop a subscription to the channel for more strategy content, more gameplay videos, all that good stuff. Follow my stream in the description down below, and I will see you guys next time.